It was a calm afternoon in downtown Los Angeles. The streets buzzed with the usual mix of vendors, tourists, and office workers grabbing lunch. Among them walked a tall man in a black jacket, dark shades, and a quiet, grounded presence, Steven Seagal. But today, Steven wasn't out as an actor or celebrity. He was there as the newly elected mayor, inspecting a few public areas without any press or entourage. No cameras, no bodyguards, just a man checking on his city. As he crossed the street toward a row of food trucks, a police cruiser slowed down beside him. Inside sat Officer Brad Willis, a cop with a reputation for being hot-headed and judgmental. He squinted at Steven, who was standing near a group of workers. To Brad, the tall man in casual clothes looked like trouble, maybe someone loitering or starting arguments. He pulled over, stepped out, and shouted, "Hey, you there, what are you doing here?" Steven turned slowly, calm and composed. "Just grabbing lunch, officer." "Everything okay?" Brad's tone sharpened. "Don't get smart with me. Show me some ID." The workers nearby went silent. A few phones quietly started recording. Steven reached for his wallet and said gently, "No problem, sir, but may I ask why I'm being stopped?" The officer stepped closer, towering his authority. "You don't ask me questions. I ask you. You look like someone causing problems around here." Steven raised an eyebrow, still calm. "I think there's a misunderstanding." Brad's lip curled. "You people always say that. Keep your hands where I can see them." That one line, "you people," made the crowd gasp. Steven's jaw tightened, but his eyes stayed steady. He didn't move an inch. The tension was thick. People whispered, "Is that Steven Seagal?" "No way." But the cop wasn't listening. He was too deep into his own anger to realize who he was talking to. And then, Brad stepped closer, finger pointing straight at Steven's chest. "You think you can ignore me? I said, show me your ID, now." The crowd fell completely silent. But no one expected what the cop did next, or who this man really was. The officer's voice echoed across the block, sharp and commanding. "I said, show me your ID, right now." Steven Seagal didn't flinch. His years of discipline had trained him to stay composed, even when faced with hostility. Slowly, he reached into his jacket, pulled out his wallet, and handed it over. "Here you go, officer." Brad snatched the ID and squinted at it. His tone dripped with sarcasm. "Steven Seagal?" "Yeah, right. You expect me to believe that?" A few bystanders chuckled quietly. One whispered, "That is Steven Seagal. Look at him." Another murmured, "Why is the cop acting like that? That's the mayor." But Brad didn't notice the murmurs. His ego had taken control. "This ID looks fake," he said flatly. "What are you really doing here? You dealing something? Scaring people?" Steven calmly replied, "No, officer. I'm just walking through the area, checking how local vendors are doing. That's all." "Checking vendors?" Brad mocked. "What are you, some kind of inspector?" Steven's tone stayed level. "Something like that." The cop smirked. "Yeah, right. Save it for someone who cares." By now, people were gathering around, restaurant workers, delivery drivers, tourists. Phones were out, recording every second. A woman whispered to her friend, "That cop's going too far." Brad noticed the cameras and raised his voice even louder. "Step back, everyone. This is police business." The crowd didn't move. Someone shouted, "He didn't do anything." Another added, "You can't talk to people like that." Brad's jaw tightened. He turned to Steven and barked, "You think hiding behind these people is going to help you?" Steven sighed softly. "I'm not hiding, officer. I'm standing here respecting your position, but you're crossing a line." The cop took a threatening step closer. "Don't tell me what line I'm crossing." A ripple of discomfort ran through the crowd. Even through the tension, Steven's calm composure stood out. His hands remained by his sides. His breathing stayed steady. The people watching could see the contrast. One man losing control, and another completely in command, without saying much at all. A teenage boy holding his phone muttered, "That dude's fearless." Steven's eyes met the officer's. "You should treat people with dignity, no matter who they are," he said quietly. Brad scoffed. "Don't lecture me. I know your type. Think you're better than everyone, huh?" Steven didn't respond. Silence fell again. The wind carried faint city noise, but here, on this small corner, it was dead quiet. The officer circled him slightly, still holding the ID, pretending to inspect it. "This ID says you're the mayor," he sneered. That's Rich. The mayor walking alone in this dump? Yeah, right. A few people in the crowd exchanged glances. One whispered, "Wait, is that true? Is he really the mayor?" Steven smiled faintly, saying nothing. Brad grew even angrier. "Answer me. You think this is funny?" Steven finally spoke. "No, officer. I think this is sad." Brad froze for a split second, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. "You watch your mouth," he snapped. "I can make your day a whole lot worse." By now, the atmosphere was boiling. The camera phones were everywhere, recording every gesture, every word. You could feel the suspense, the humiliation, and the quiet anticipation of justice that hadn't yet arrived. And still, Steven didn't move. He just looked around at the people watching, just scared, angry, but powerless, and then back at the officer. He said calmly, "Sometimes the badge becomes a mask, and people forget the man behind it." The officer blinked, confused. "What's that supposed to mean?" Steven didn't reply. He simply crossed his arms and looked up at the sky, taking a deep breath, as if waiting for something or someone wanting to break the tension. A food vendor nearby whispered, "Man, that cop's about to regret this." Brad threw the ID back at Steven's chest. "Get lost. I don't want to see you around here again." Steven caught the ID midair. His hand was steady as stone. "Are you ordering me to leave public property, officer?" Brad's eyes narrowed. "You heard me. Walk away before I make you." A collective gasp rose from the crowd. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. Some were already posting live, streaming the confrontation online. Steven took a step closer. Not threatening, just firm. "I'm not walking away from what's right." The officer's fists clenched. His pride was about to push him past reason. The tension was unbearable. You could feel the storm brewing in his veins, and everyone watching could sense it was only a matter of seconds before something explosive happened. And just before it did. Have you ever seen someone abuse their badge or power? Comment below and tell us, which country and city are you watching this story from? We love seeing where our community's tuning in from around the world. Because the next moment would change everything. The tension was suffocating. Even the city's background noise seemed to fade away. All that remained was the sound of heavy breathing, Steven's calm, steady rhythm against the officer's ragged, angry gasps. Officer Brad's hand twitched near his belt. His jaw clenched. Every muscle in his face screamed frustration. "You think you can just stand there and talk down to me?" he growled. Steven didn't respond. His silence was louder than any argument. The crowd watched, frozen. Dozens of phones pointed at the scene. 100 eyes waiting for what everyone feared might happen next. Brad took a half step forward, his face inches from Steven's. "You better show some respect before I..." And then it happened. In a flash of blind rage, the officer shoved Steven hard, then swung a punch straight into his chest. The sound echoed across the street. A single, shocking thud. Gasps exploded from the crowd. "Whoa, did he just hit him? Is he insane?" Steven stumbled slightly but didn't fall. He just stood there unmoving and like a mountain. The cop stepped back, surprised that his punch didn't even make Steven flinch. Steven's eyes slowly lifted, locking onto Brad's. They weren't angry. They weren't afraid. They were disappointed. In that one look, every ounce of Steven's quiet. A teenager whispered to his friend, "He doesn't even realize who that is." The friend shook his head. "He will. Real soon." The officer's voice cracked as he yelled again, "I said step back!" Steven finally spoke, calm as ever. "Officer, I've done nothing wrong. But you've crossed a line you can't uncross." Brad pointed at him. "You don't tell me about lines. I make the rules here." The moment felt electric. The world watching, the city holding its breath, and still Steven didn't react with aggression. He didn't raise a fist or his voice. He simply stood tall, looking like a man carved from stone. His stillness alone was more powerful than any show of force. The cop, sweating and breathing hard, barked out, "Fine. You're under arrest for resisting an officer." The crowd roared in disbelief. Resisting? He didn't even move! Brad reached for his cuffs, but before he could touch Steven, the deep rumble of an engine rolled in from the corner. A sleek black SUV pulled up fast. The doors opened. 2 men in dark suits stepped out. The crowd immediately reacted. Who are they? Security? No way, that's City Hall detail. Brad spun around, confused. Who the hell are you people? This is a police situation. One of the men ignored him completely and rushed toward Steven. Sir, are you okay, sir? Brad repeated, frowning. Wait, sir? What's going on here? The man in the suit turned to him sharply. Officer, you've just made a serious mistake. Brad blinked. What mistake? The man's voice dropped cold and steady. You just assaulted the mayor. The entire street went silent. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. The crowd's gasps turned into whispers, then a collective shout, a roar of realization. The cop's eyes widened as the blood drained from his face. What did you say? The man repeated slowly. You just punched Mayor Steven Seagal. Brad took a step back, his hand trembling. And no, that's not possible. But it was too late. The phones had captured everything. The punch, the insult, the arrogance. The people he had ignored were now shouting for justice. Fire him. Arrest him. Can you believe that? He hit the mayor. Brad's lips parted, but no words came out. He looked around, trapped in a sea of eyes. The same people he had tried to intimidate moments ago. And Steven? He just stood there silent, looking at the man who had hit him. Not with anger, but with pity. If you were standing there as a bystander, would you step in? Or stay silent? Type your answer in the comments. Because in that moment, the real fight wasn't about fists or power. It was about respect, humility, and truth finally coming to light. The entire street froze. Every camera, every pair of eyes, every whisper, locked on one man. Mayor Steven Seagal, someone said under their breath. The words spread like wildfire. People who had been watching quietly now stepped closer, disbelief painted across their faces. Wait, did he say mayor? No way, that's him? Holy, he's the new mayor. The phones were now live streaming across platforms. Hashtags began flooding feeds within seconds. Josh Mayor Seagal. Justice for Steven. Josh corrupt cop Brad. The officer stood there frozen, his hand still half raised, his eyes darting between Steven and the men in suits. His voice came out in a trembling whisper. You're the mayor? Steven looked at him calmly, his face unreadable. Yes, officer. I am. The crowd exploded with noise, shouts, cheers, gasps, 1,000 overlapping voices. Reporters who happened to be nearby began rushing toward the scene. Within minutes, cameras and microphones appeared from every angle. Brad's partner, who had been sitting in the patrol car the whole time, hurried out, his face pale. Brad, we need to stop. That's really him. But Brad wasn't hearing anything. His brain was still trying to process what had just happened. He had just punched the mayor of Los Angeles. In front of dozens of witnesses. On camera, Steven took a slow breath, brushing off his jacket. I'm not pressing charges, he said quietly. Not yet, the officer blinked. But what do you mean, not yet? Steven looked him straight in the eyes. Because I believe everyone deserves a chance to do the right thing, even after doing the wrong one. The crowd murmured in agreement. Some people nodded. Others clapped. Brad's partner spoke up nervously. Sir, I had no idea. I'm sorry, we'll take care of this. Steven raised a hand gently to stop him. No need. Just make sure your department takes care of this city instead of profiling the people who live in it. His words carried weight. They weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. Every syllable cut straight through the noise. Calm, powerful, and righteous. The media had now surrounded them. Cameras flashed. A reporter called out, Mayor Seagal, is it true this officer attacked you without cause? Steven didn't answer right away. He looked at the crowd, the mix of workers, tourists, and ordinary citizens who had witnessed everything. Let's just say, he finally replied, sometimes people forget that power isn't measured by the badge you wear, but by the way you treat others. The applause that followed was immediate. The sound rolled through the street like thunder. Brad tried to speak, his words stumbling. I didn't know. I didn't recognize you, sir. Steven tilted his head. That's the point. You shouldn't have to recognize me to show respect. A hush fell again. The crowd's energy shifted, from chaos to admiration. People weren't just watching a scandal unfold anymore. They were witnessing a lesson, live, raw, and unforgettable. A young man shouted from the back, That's leadership right there. Another said, Man, imagine having that kind of composure after getting hit like that. The camera crews were eating it up. Clips would soon flood the internet, replaying the moment when the punch turned into a powerful message. Steven's security team moved closer. "Sir, we should take you back to City Hall," one of them whispered. But Steven shook his head. "Not yet. I came here to talk to the people. Let's finish that." He turned toward the crowd again. "Every day I walk this city without cameras or security because I want to see it through your eyes. The traffic, the struggles, the kindness, and yes, the flaws." People leaned in. It wasn't a speech, and it was truth. "And today," he continued, "I saw one of those flaws firsthand. But I also saw something stronger. Your courage. You filmed, you spoke up, you didn't let fear silence you. That's what keeps a city alive." The applause came again, louder this time. Brad just stood there, his eyes glossy, his arrogance replaced by regret. He finally whispered, "Sir, I'm sorry." Steven looked at him for a long moment before replying. "If you mean that, prove it. Change how you treat people. Protect them, don't persecute them. That's your job." Brad nodded, voice shaking. "Yes, sir. I will." One of the news anchors turned toward the camera. "You just witnessed a moment of leadership in real time. A racist incident turned into a powerful example of grace under fire." Steven gave one last look to the officer and said, "You don't fix hate with hate. You fix it with accountability." Then he turned, walking calmly toward his SUV. The crowd parted, cheering him on as he passed. Phones rose in the air, recording every step. "Mayor Seagal, you're a legend." "We respect you, sir." The city that had once been silent in shock was now roaring in admiration. And as Steven stepped into the car, a small smile crossed his face, not of victory but of peace. Because deep down, he knew that what had just happened would go far beyond one street, one cop, or one punch. It was a wake-up call for everyone watching. By evening, the footage had spread across every screen in America. News channels, YouTube, TikTok. The moment Officer Brad punched Mayor Steven Seagal was everywhere. The clip was titled things like, "Racist cop punches mayor, instantly regrets it." "Steven Seagal's calm after the punch goes viral." "The mayor who fought hate with dignity." Millions of people watched in disbelief as the video played on repeat. The shove, the punch, the silence, and then Steven's calm. Powerful words, but Steven didn't care about trending. He cared about truth. That night, City Hall was surrounded by reporters and citizens. Candles flickered outside the steps as people gathered, demanding justice but also showing support for their mayor. Some held signs that read, "Respect over rage. Leadership looks like this. We stand with Seagal." Inside, the air was thick with cameras and flashes. Steven walked up to the podium, the same calm expression he'd worn during the confrontation still on his face. The crowd. Steven continued, "When a man wearing a uniform forgets that his job is to protect, not to profile, that's when the system starts to rot. But I believe in redemption, I believe in accountability, and I believe this city can do better." He looked out at the rows of faces, journalists, city workers, ordinary citizens. "Officer Brad made a terrible mistake," Steven said. "But I won't use my position to destroy a man. Instead, I'll use it to change a department." A murmur ran through the audience. This wasn't what they expected. No anger, no vengeance. Just clarity and purpose. Steven raised his voice slightly. "Starting tomorrow, we're launching a full review of our police training program. Every officer will go through anti-bias education and community engagement training. Not as punishment, but as progress." The applause started small, then grew into thunderous clapping. Reporters shouted over one another. "Mr. Mayor, do you forgive the officer?" Steven nodded slowly. "Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened, but it prevents hate from growing roots. And that's how we heal, not by revenge, but by reform." One reporter called out, "How did you stay so calm after being attacked?" Steven smiled faintly. "Because power isn't about fighting back. It's about knowing when not to." The audience fell silent again, soaking in every word. He went on, his voice carrying the strength of conviction. "I've spent my life learning that the greatest strength is restraint. And today, that restraint turned a moment of hate into a message of hope." Behind him, a screen displayed still images from the viral footage. The punch, the crowd's reaction, the moment Steven extended forgiveness instead of fury. People watching from home couldn't look away. Comment sections flooded with emotion. This man just gave the speech of the year. Imagine if every leader handled things like this. Respect isn't earned by fear, it's earned by dignity. Meanwhile, at the police precinct, Officer Brad sat in silence in the chief's office. His badge lay on the desk. His face was pale, his hands shaking. The chief sighed, watching the speech play on the TV. "You really messed up, Brad," he said quietly. "But you're lucky. The man you hit has more mercy than most." Brad nodded, eyes wet. "I don't deserve it." The chief looked at him sharply. "Then earn it back." Back at City Hall, Steven was wrapping up his statement. "I won't let this moment divide us," he said. "Because this city, our city, doesn't need more hate. It needs healing. And that starts right here." The applause was deafening. People stood up cheering, chanting his name. "Seagal, Seagal, Seagal!" Reporters shouted as he stepped away from the podium. But Steven didn't stop for interviews. He simply nodded at his staff and walked out through the front doors where hundreds of citizens waited. The crowd parted again like it had earlier that day. Some reached out to shake his hand. Others just smiled with admiration. One woman, holding her young son, said softly, "Thank you for showing my boy what real strength looks like." Steven smiled and replied, "Teach him that respect is stronger than any punch." That line would soon go viral too, replayed in clips, turned into quotes, and shared across millions of profiles worldwide. As he stepped into his car, the cameras caught his final moment, looking out the window at the people cheering for him, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. It wasn't the punch that defined him, it was the way he chose to respond. And that response, calm, wise, and powerful, had just changed the course of his city forever. By the next morning, the world had seen it. The punch, the silence. The forgiveness clips of the confrontation in Steven's speech were now everywhere. News anchors called it the calmest act of leadership in modern politics. Celebrities tweeted their support. Communities that had once felt unheard finally saw a leader standing for them. But for Steven Seagal, it wasn't about fame. It was about impact. He sat in his quiet office early that morning, the city skyline glowing outside his window. His assistant entered with a phone in hand. "Sir," she said softly, "you're trending in 57 countries." Steven smiled faintly. "Good. Then maybe the message is spreading too." She nodded. "It is. People are calling you the mayor who fought hate with honor." He turned his chair toward the window, his voice thoughtful. "Let's just make sure this moment turns into change, not just hashtags." Across the city, however, one man wasn't smiling. Officer Brad sat alone in a small room at the precinct, waiting to face the department's disciplinary board. His badge and gun lay on the table before him. The weight of shame hung heavier than either. His partner walked in quietly. "They're calling you in soon," he said. "You okay?" Brad shook his head. "I don't know what to say. I messed up worse than I ever thought possible." His partner sighed. "You didn't just hit a man. You hit what he stands for, and the whole world saw it." Brad closed his eyes. "I thought he was just some guy. I let my anger, my judgment, get the best of me." His partner leaned against the wall. "Then tell the truth. It's the only way out now." Meanwhile, City Hall's courtyard was filled with people lighting candles and holding signs that read, "Respect for all." "We stand with the mayor." Reporters swarmed the steps trying to get another statement. But Steven wasn't giving speeches today. He was out visiting a youth center in South Central LA, shaking hands with kids, talking to community leaders, and quietly living the values he preached. One boy, maybe 12 years old, asked shyly, "Mayor Seagal, weren't you mad when that cop hit you?" Steven smiled, crouched down to his level, and said, "I was disappointed, not mad. Anger only makes you weak. But staying calm, that's real power." The boy grinned. "I want to be like that someday." Steven patted his shoulder. "Then remember this, the strongest person in the room is the one who doesn't need to prove it." That small exchange would later become another viral clip, shared millions of times, turning into a quote on posters, t-shirts, and motivational reels. If you were in Steven's place, would you forgive the officer or demand punishment? Type your honest answer below. Later that afternoon, Steven was called to attend a private session at the police headquarters. The chief greeted him at the door. "Mr. Mayor, thank you for coming. The officer is waiting to apologize personally." Steven nodded, calm as ever. "Let's hear him out." Inside the room, Brad stood up nervously as Steven entered. His hands trembled as he spoke. "Sir, I don't know how to say this. I was wrong. I let my bias and ego blind me. I disrespected not just you, but everything I'm supposed to stand for as an officer." Steven studied him for a long moment before replying. "Do you understand what really went wrong, Brad?" Brad hesitated. "I thought authority made me better than others, but you showed me that true authority comes from respect, not fear." Steven nodded slowly. "Then there's hope for you yet." Brad swallowed hard. "I'm ready to face the consequences." The chief cleared his throat. "Officer Brad Willis will be suspended pending full review. He'll undergo mandatory reform training and public service under the mayor's equality initiative." Brad looked down, then back up at Steven. "Thank you for not destroying me when you had the chance." Steven replied quietly. "Everyone deserves a second chance, but not everyone earns it. Show me that you can." Brad nodded, tears in his eyes. When Steven walked out of that room, dozens of reporters waited, shouting questions. "Mr. Mayor, did the officer lose his job? Are you pressing charges? Do you think justice has been served?" Steven paused before his SUV, turned slightly, and said into the microphones, "Justice isn't about revenge. It's about restoration. He'll learn, and this city will learn. That's how we win." The crowd erupted in applause. By that evening, the internet had crowned Steven a global icon of integrity. Hashtags like "Calm Mayor of Respect" and "Strengthening Calm" dominated every platform. Even international leaders quoted him in speeches about leadership and reform. At a late-night news broadcast, a host summed it up perfectly. "In a world where power often means control, Steven Seagal reminded us that real power means restraint. That's not just leadership, that's humanity." And somewhere in his quiet office, Steven sat again, looking over the city lights. He didn't feel pride. He felt peace, because he knew that the incident wasn't just an embarrassment. It was a mirror, a reflection of what society needed to confront and change. And as the camera slowly faded out on that image, the calm mayor, the glowing city, and the world watching, one truth rang clear. Sometimes the loudest statement a man can make is silence filled with purpose. By dawn, Steven Seagal's name was everywhere. News anchors called it the punch that changed policing. Editorials praised him as the calm mayor America needed. And social media? It had turned him into a living legend. Clips from the confrontation played on every major network. Reaction videos flooded YouTube, people crying, applauding, debating, and sharing how Steven's composure inspired them. A teacher in Chicago showed the footage to her students, saying, "This is how a leader handles hate, not with anger, but with grace." A pastor in New York quoted him during a sermon, "You don't fix hate with hate, you fix it with accountability." Even international figures from Japan, Brazil, and the UK publicly praised him. One headline read, "Steven Seagal's calm punches harder than any fist ever could." The city of Los Angeles, once divided by tension, now stood united in pride. Murals began appearing across walls, Steven's calm expression beneath bold letters that read, "Respect, humility, strength." But Steven didn't see himself as a hero. In an interview days later, he said quietly, "I'm not proud that a man hit me. I'm proud that I didn't hit him back." That single line went viral again, quoted by millions, turned into motivational posts, tattoo designs, and even songs. The officer, Brad Willis, began his reform training under the mayor's supervision. He joined community outreach programs, worked with local youth, and met with people he'd once judged. Slowly, his arrogance gave way to understanding. One day, Steven visited one of those programs. Brad was there, helping paint a playground wall. When he saw Steven, he froze. "Mr. Mayor," he said softly, "I'm still trying to make it right." Steven looked at the colorful mural of kids and families and replied, "You already started. Just don't stop." Brad nodded, tears in his eyes. Thank you for not giving up on me. Steven smiled faintly. I didn't forgive you for me. I forgave you for the city. That moment, captured by a local news crew, went viral too. People around the world commented things like, "Forgiveness is the ultimate strength." This is what real leadership looks like. Imagine if every politician acted like this. Soon, communities everywhere began hosting respect walks, peaceful gatherings inspired by Steven's example. The message was simple but powerful: no hate, no profiling, just equality. The mayor's office began receiving letters from around the world, and from children, teachers, veterans, even police officers who said the story changed how they saw their role. One letter stood out. It came from a retired officer who wrote, "I watched your video 10 times. I realized I spent 30 years enforcing laws but forgot to enforce compassion. You reminded me why I put on the badge in the first place." When Steven read that, he just smiled. "That's the real victory," he said. Weeks later, as the media frenzy began to fade, one final clip surfaced, the full unedited version of the confrontation. It showed something the shorter versions hadn't. Right after the punch, before anyone realized who he was, Steven quietly said, "Calm down, officer. You're better than this." That one sentence, soft, steady, and human, became the heart of a global movement. If this story taught you something, that respect is stronger than rage, and that real power comes from calm. Then type respect in the comments right now. Let's flood this video with positivity and remind the world that strength isn't about fighting back, and it's about standing tall with dignity. And as the final scene fades, Steven standing on a balcony overlooking the glowing city skyline, his voice echoes softly in the background. The world doesn't change when we shout. It changes when we listen and lead with respect. The screen fades to black, and in bold white letters, "Based on true leadership. Respect. Seagal story. Stand for justice."